Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a night of gratitude, a time to gather with family and friends, share a meal, and appreciate what we had. But that night, as I sat at the dinner table surrounded by people I had known for years, I never expected my wife to turn me into the main joke of the evening. The meal had been going well. Everyone was enjoying the food, laughing, and swapping stories. I was engaged in a conversation with my brother-in-law when my wife's voice suddenly cut through the room. "Oh, come on," she said loudly, smirking. "You guys should be thankful. At least you have something exciting going on. I can't say the same for what happens in our bedroom." For a second, there was silence. Then scattered chuckles. Some tried to mask their amusement by taking a sip of their drinks or looking down at their plates. But the damage was already done. My wife's words had landed exactly how she wanted them to. She had thrown me under the bus for her own entertainment. I felt the heat rise to my face, but I forced myself to stay calm. I looked around the table, seeing the uncomfortable expressions mixed with poorly hidden grins. Some of the guests awkwardly shifted in their seats, while others stole glances at me, waiting to see how I would react. I could have said something right then. But what was the point? Calling her out in front of everyone would only make things worse. Instead, I picked up my glass, took a slow sip, and acted as if the comment didn't bother me. But inside, something changed. This wasn't just a tasteless joke. It wasn't just an offhand remark made in the heat of the moment. It was deliberate. And the worst part, this wasn't the first time. I thought back to other times when she had made similar comments, maybe not as direct, but enough to chip away at my dignity little by little. We never did it in private, always in front of an audience, whether it was her friends, family, or even coworkers. And I had let it slide every time. But this was different. The night went on, but I was no longer really there. I laughed when necessary, responded when spoken to, but my mind was elsewhere. I noticed how she carried on as if nothing had happened, as if humiliating me was just another casual conversation for her. When the meal ended and people started clearing their plates, I got up to help. I moved mechanically, stacking dishes, carrying them to the sink. My wife was still chatting with a few guests, completely unbothered. It was like the moment had never even happened for her. But for me, that was the moment I decided things were going to change. Once the last guest left and the front door clicked shut, the house fell into an eerie silence. The warmth and noise of the Thanksgiving gathering had disappeared, leaving behind only the mess of empty plates, half-finished drinks, and crumpled napkins. I stood in the kitchen, rinsing a plate under the faucet, my mind still replaying what had happened at the dinner table. I waited for her to say something, anything, maybe an apology, maybe a casual acknowledgement of what she had done. But nothing. She walked in humming to herself, gathering a few glasses from the counter like she hadn't just humiliated me in front of everyone. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and finally broke the silence. "So that little joke at dinner, was that really necessary?" I asked, keeping my tone even. She barely looked up. "Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke." "Just a joke," I nodded slowly, exhaling through my nose. "Right, a joke. And humiliating me in front of our friends and family. What's funny to you?" She scoffed, placing the glasses in the sink. "Oh please, no one even cared. You're acting like I insulted you in some serious way." Everyone was laughing. It wasn't that big of a deal. I clenched my jaw, staring at her, trying to understand how she could be so casual about it. No one cared. I sure as hell did. I could have kept going, could have pointed out how this wasn't the first time she had done something like this. But I stopped myself. What was the point? She wasn't listening. She never listened. She grabbed a bottle of wine from the counter, poured herself a glass, and took a sip, completely unbothered. "You're overreacting," she added with a shrug. "You always do." There it was, the way she always twisted things, making me feel like I was the problem, like I was being too sensitive, too dramatic. For years I had let things slide. I had ignored the little jabs, the passive-aggressive comments, the way she dismissed me when I tried to express how I felt. But tonight something felt different. I didn't argue. I didn't push the conversation any further. I just watched her for a moment before turning and walking out of the kitchen. I headed upstairs, loosened my tie, and sat down on the edge of the bed. The house was quiet again, but my mind wasn't. I kept thinking about how easy it was for her to make a fool out of me, how confident she was that I wouldn't do anything about it, and for a long time she had been right. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror across the room. The man staring back at me looked tired, but something was shifting, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't going to let this slide, not this time. The next morning I got up earlier than usual. I didn't wake her. I didn't even glance in her direction as I got dressed and left the bedroom. There was no point in having another pointless conversation about the night before. She had made it clear how little she cared. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door without my usual routine of making coffee or checking emails. Instead, I drove straight to the gym. I hadn't been there in months, maybe even longer. Life had gotten in the way, work, responsibilities, and a marriage where I felt more like an accessory than a partner. But standing there in front of the gym, I realized something. I had let myself go. Not just physically, but mentally. I stepped inside, signed up for a new membership, and got to work. The first few days were rough. My muscles ached, and I felt out of breath quicker than I remembered. But I kept pushing. It wasn't just about getting in shape. It was about reclaiming something I had lost. Every rep, every drop of sweat was a reminder that I was taking back control. Outside of the gym, I made other changes. Small ones at first. I started dressing better, trading in my usual worn-out jeans and baggy t-shirts for fitted clothes that actually looked good on me. I got a haircut, something I hadn't really put much thought into in years. I focused on my posture, on the way I carried myself. At home, I didn't announce these changes. I didn't seek her approval or even acknowledge her reactions. But I noticed the way she started watching me more closely. At first, she didn't say much, just glanced at me when I came home from the gym. Maybe lingering a little longer when I walked past her. But I knew she noticed, and I kept going. I took on new projects at work, put in extra effort. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I wanted to remind myself of what I was capable of. I reconnected with friends I hadn't spoken to in a while. I started making plans without asking for her opinion, without checking if it was convenient for her. For years, I had been living on autopilot, moving through life in a way that made things easier for her. But now I was doing things for myself. One evening after coming back from the gym, I walked into the kitchen to grab a bottle of water. She was sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone, but when she saw me, she set it down and tilted her head. "You've been going to the gym a lot lately," she said, her tone light but laced with something else. I twisted the cap off my water bottle and took a sip. "Yeah." She waited like she expected me to say more. When I didn't, she forced a small laugh. "What brought that on?" I shrugged, leaning against the counter. Felt like it was time for a change. She studied me for a moment, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in her expression that I hadn't seen before. Uncertainty. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. I just took another sip of water, nodded and walked past her, leaving her sitting there wondering what was coming next. Over the next few weeks, I kept moving forward. I didn't slow down. I didn't explain myself. I didn't seek her validation. And that more than anything seemed to rattle her. She started paying closer attention, watching me as I came home, eyeing my phone when it buzzed, throwing in casual comments about how I was acting different. But I wasn't acting. I was different. I wasn't waiting around for her approval anymore. At first, she tried to brush it off, pretending like she didn't care. But I could tell it was getting to her. One night, while I was getting ready to go out, something I never used to do without checking with her first, she leaned against the doorframe and crossed her arms. "Where are you going?" she asked, keeping her tone light. But I could see the tension in her face. Out, I said, buttoning my shirt. With who? I grabbed my watch from the dresser and put it on. Some friends from work. She let out a short laugh, shaking her head. You never used to go out like this. I met her eyes through the mirror. Yeah, I guess I didn't. I saw the way her lips pressed together. She wasn't used to this. She was used to having control, used to me being predictable, always available, always bending to whatever fit her needs. But now she was the one feeling unsure. A few nights later, I was in the living room responding to messages when she sat down next to me. You've been really busy lately, she said, her voice softer than usual. I nodded. Yeah. She hesitated before speaking again. You know, if something's wrong, you can talk to me. I almost laughed at that. Now she wanted to talk, after years of dismissing me, after brushing off every time I tried to bring up how I felt. Now when she could feel the shift happening, when she could sense that she was losing her grip, I didn't take the bait. I didn't reassure her. I didn't tell her everything was fine. I just looked at her, held her gaze for a moment, then went back to my phone. That silence said more than words ever could. She started trying harder after that. Little things at first. She'd cook dinner more often, bring up old memories, and mention places we used to go when things were better. She tried to act like nothing had changed, like we could just fall back into our old roles. But I wasn't playing along. One night she reached for my hand while we were sitting on the couch. It was something she hadn't done in months, maybe even longer. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold on either, because for the first time in a long time I wasn't the one chasing. The changes in her behavior became more obvious after that night. She started trying harder, but it wasn't out of love or genuine effort. It was out of fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of no longer being the one pulling the strings. She would randomly compliment me, something that hadn't happened in years. You look good today, she'd say, studying me like I was a stranger she was trying to figure out. I'd nod. Thanks. No excitement. No eagerness. Just a simple acknowledgement. She started texting me more during the day, asking about my schedule, wanting to know when I'd be home. She had never cared much before. If I came home late from work, she barely noticed. Now she was suddenly interested in my whereabouts. One evening, as I was getting ready for the gym, she leaned against the doorway, watching me tie my sneakers. You've really committed to this whole fitness thing, she said. I nodded. Yeah. She hesitated before speaking again. Are you doing this for someone? I paused, looking up at her. The insecurity in her voice was something I had never heard before. I could see it in her eyes. She was trying to figure out if I had already moved on, if I had found someone else. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch between us. Then I stood up, grabbed my keys and said, I'm doing this for myself. And that was the truth. She didn't like that answer. She wanted me to say something that would make her feel secure again, something that would let her slip back into the comfort of knowing she had control. But I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. She started pushing harder after that. One night, she cooked my favorite meal, a dish she hadn't made in years. She set the table, lit candles, and even poured me a drink before I sat down. I took a bite. It was good. It always had been. But I wasn't going to pretend this was some magical fix. This is nice, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She smiled, relieved. I thought it would be. I know we've been a little off lately, but maybe we just need to spend more time together. I let her talk. I let her explain how things could go back to normal, how we could work on things. But the more she spoke, the more I realized she wasn't apologizing. She wasn't acknowledging anything she had done. She was just trying to reset things back to the way they were, and I wasn't interested in that. Later that night, as she reached for my hand again, I let her. But I didn't hold on because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't the same man she had spent years belittling, and I wasn't going to be that man ever again. The shift between us was undeniable now. She could feel it just as much as I could. The difference was, I had accepted it. She was still trying to fight it. She started making last-minute plans for us. Dinners, weekend getaways, things she had never put much effort into before. She wanted to go back to the version of us that had existed when she held all the power. But that version of me was gone. One evening, she came home earlier than usual. I was in the living room reading when she sat across from me. I was thinking. She started tucking her hair behind her ear. Maybe we should go on a trip. Just us. Get away for a while. I closed my book and looked at her. Why now? She shrugged, forcing a smile. I just think we need it. Need it. I knew what she meant. She needed it. She needed to believe that I could still be pulled back into place, that she could smooth over the damage she had done with a few romantic gestures. But I wasn't interested in playing pretend. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. Her smile faltered. Why not? I sighed, setting the book down. As I'm done. The words landed heavy between us. She blinked, as if trying to process what I had just said. Done with what? She asked, her voice quieter now. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Done with this. Done pretending that what happened at Thanksgiving was just a joke. Done ignoring the way you've treated me for years. Done being the guy you can take for granted. Her face tightened. So that's it. You're just giving up on us. I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. You gave up on us a long time ago. The only difference is, I finally noticed. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but then she closed it. Maybe she knew I was right. Maybe she just didn't have the energy to fight anymore. For a long moment, she just sat there. Then she swallowed hard and nodded. So what now? I exhaled, standing up. Now I move on. And I did. The next few weeks were a process. Sorting things out, making arrangements, figuring out what life would look like without her in it. But the truth was, I had already started moving on long before that conversation. The moment she humiliated me at Thanksgiving, something inside me had shifted. And from that point on, every step I had taken, every choice I had made, it had all been leading me here. To a life where I was no longer defined by the way she saw me. To a life where I chose me. So you must be wondering what became of that fateful Thanksgiving day. The divorce was a mess. Lawyers, arguments, division of assets. It was everything you'd expect from a marriage that had been falling apart long before either of us admitted it. She didn't take it well. At first she tried to act indifferent, as if it didn't bother her. Then came the anger, the accusations, the sudden desperation to fix what she had spent years breaking. But it was too late. Walking away wasn't easy, but staying would have been worse. And now I'm living life on my own terms. No more walking on eggshells. No more being the punchline to someone else's jokes. I built myself back up. Not for revenge. Not to prove a point. But because I deserve better. So if you are sitting there wondering if it's worth it to reclaim your self-respect, let me make it simple for you. It is.